So we're now going to go to Kate Coleman from the UK. She's representative of Keep Prisons Single Sex. The first question is, in a nutshell, what's the problem?
Right, so what we've just done is a piece of research looking at DBS checks and identity verification and the problem which happens when somebody is able to change gender as part of changing their identity. In a nutshell, the problem is that
we need to. What somebody said already. What are DBS?
It's a DBS check. Yes, sorry. Okay, so I was going to explain DBS checks in the second point, but I shall explain it now. So DBS stands for Disclosure and Barring Service. The DBS is a non-departmental public body accountable to Parliament. Its functions are provided for in law, and the purpose of the service is to help employers fulfil their safeguarding duties. And again, those safeguarding duties are specified in law, by enabling them to make safer recruitment decisions. So the DBS is one tool of safeguarding, typically for organisations where you will be working with children or with vulnerable adults, but there are other cases where this applies. So, for example, taxi drivers. What it does this by processing and issuing checks on individuals who've applied to work in roles where safeguarding considerations apply. You've got different levels of check. Again, those are provided for in law. The circumstances where the different levels of check have to be requested are provided for in law. So none of this is optional, it's all obligatory. And what the checks do is that they disclose records of relevant past convictions, cautions, reprimands, and police warnings. And this, so that is it in a nutshell, sort of what the DBS service is. The sources of information that the DBS will check include the Police National Computer, which is a system which stores and shares criminal records information across the UK. So all criminal records from local police forces will be transferred to the Police National Computer. So that's for ease of checking. But at the higher levels of check, you'll have local police force records which are also checked. And that might be for sort of lower level things, for arrests, for cautions, reprimands, the non-crime hate incidents, which we all know and love, which will be recorded at a local level. Those may be disclosed at the higher level of DBS checks. And at the highest level, you've got two lists known as the barred lists. You've got a children's barred list and an adult's barred list. And these contain the names and details of all individuals who, for various reasons, there's different ways by which you can get put on one of those lists. But those are people who are barred from working in roles where safeguarding applies with children or with adults. So at the very highest level of check, those lists will also be checked against. And I think it's important to emphasise that DBS checks, they're a tool of safeguarding. It's not the beginning and the end of safeguarding. That organisations where safeguarding applies, their statutory obligations extend above and beyond just DBS checks. So the problem that we wanted to look at what happens if you change your gender as part of changing your identity. There's already been research which has been carried out by an organisation called the Safeguarding Alliance, and they looked at what happens when somebody changes their name via deed poll, and they not unreasonably had a particular concern that registered sex offenders are able to change their name by deed poll, and thus they can sever their connection with their existing police records, their existing records of offending, and they can use that loophole in the safeguarding process in order to access vulnerable groups and to further offend. But nobody had looked at what happens when you actually change gender as well. One of our team tried for about a year to get the Safeguarding Alliance to look at this, and tried to get the Safeguarding Minister to start looking at this, and the various MPs who'd taken an interest in this issue. And we just kept being told, no, there's nothing to see, there's nothing to see. Government actually agreed to do a review into deed polls and the ability of registered sex offenders to change their name by deed poll. And we asked, will you actually look at things like gender recognition certificates or changing your gender by self-ID as part of that? And we were told no. So we thought, fine, well, we'll do the piece of research instead if nobody else is going to do it. So the problem, I'm sure this is all going to come as a crashing non-surprise to everybody, is that it extends beyond gender recognition certificate. We knew that there was already going to be a problem with gender recognition certificate, because you can obtain a new issue birth certificate which displays your legal gender in lieu of your sex registered at birth and your new name. So we already knew that there was going to be a problem with that. But we found that the documents that you can get changed by a process of self-declaration, which include passport and driving license, and you can change these very easily for any reason and without challenge. So these get presented for the purposes of a DBS check. And that means that the individual can successfully sever any connection with existing records of offending that might otherwise show up. So you create a clean slate. Now, there's an advantage to also changing your gender over and above just changing it by deed poll, which stems from the enhanced privacy rights that are granted when somebody changes their gender. And the Disclosure and Barring Service also grants these privacy rights to people who do that. So the upshot of that is that applicants who change their gender are able to request that their previous names are withheld from the DBS certificate that's issued.
That's
if
horrific.
You change your name by deed poll, you can't request that. If you change your gender as well as changing your name, that's a perfectly reasonable, and this includes by self-identity. So it's not just where you've got a gender recognition certificate, not that in my view that would make it any better, but just to demonstrate how easy this is. So you can request that all of your previous identities are withheld from your DBS certificate. Now, as I said earlier, a DBS check is merely part of safeguarding. It's not the end of safeguarding. And knowing an applicant's previous identities is a key component of safeguarding, because that means that the organisation with statutory responsibility for safeguarding can then make their own inquiries about all of these different names. If somebody's pitched up and, they want to start coaching kids at football and you've got 4 extra names there that you didn't know about, you can start making some phone calls around other kids' football clubs or, whoever it is, to start saying, okay, I know you haven't heard of Bob Edwards, but have you heard of James Edwards? What's the story? What's the picture? It's a key component of safeguarding. And of course, you can have your legal gender, or not even your legal gender, your acquired gender, your self-declared gender, stated on your DBS certificate in lieu of your sex registered at birth. So we were a little bit kind of gobsmacked at that. We sort of expected that, and we did a DBS check for me, and we were able to get away with, all sorts of stuff, not disclosing previous names. So although there is a tick box on the online application form where you're supposed to, tick that you have previous names and then list those and the dates, there's absolutely, no way to check that. It all relies on applicant honesty, basically, about doing the right thing. And reasonably you could forget, let's be reasonable about it. Somebody could forget, but an omission could be with nefarious intent. It could be in order to exploit a loophole. What we actually found most scary was what's called the sensitive applications route. So this is a specific route of application which has been created by the DBS in order that transgender applicants, including those who have changed gender on the basis of self-ID, are able to continue to hide their identities. So the upside of somebody using this, again, there's no need to use this. If you want to, exploit the loophole, you can just say, oh, I haven't got any previous names, and my name's Angela Smith, even though it used to be Andrew. My name's Angela Smith and I'm female, and here's my passport, and here's my driving license, and here's my utility bill. And no, I haven't had any other names. And there's no way of calling somebody out on that. But let's assume that Andrew does want to make sure that all DBS checks are carried out. So what Andrew will do is phone up the sensitive applications route, and go, yeah, hi, I've just completed this DBS check online. Here is the code, the identification number. I used to be Andrew and I used to be male between these particular dates. And they'll go, thank you very much. They will then conduct the check at whatever level has been requested against Andrew. So at least that the certificate that's produced would display any convictions or cautions or reprimands or whatever it is for Andrew as well as for Angela, but it won't list Andrew's name. It will still just say Angela. And that in itself is a massive safeguarding loop. That creates risk. And it will also list Angela as female, not as male. And again, that creates a safeguarding risk. So we asked, is this just for people with a gender recognition certificate? And we were told no. And we were told that the privacy rights for transgender people not to have their previous identities revealed and not to have their sex registered at birth revealed also extends to those who have changed gender by a process of self-declaration, which is manifestly not the case. Sorry, you want to say?
I just want to ask. So let's say if you're a paedophile and you have found it difficult to get access to kids and you want to carry on getting it, but you want to not actually have to wear a dress or wear lipstick or anything, can you change to non-binary so you could actually just carry on presenting as a male and get away with all of this?
Well, or you don't have to pretend to be no. There's no ability at present to change to non-binary. Your options are binary. So if you're a male paedophile, you could change everything to female, and you can sever your connection with your record of history. It would be bizarre for you to be honest and go through the sensitive applications route, because then you'll be flagged when you've given your paedophilia name, as it were. So that would be a very bizarre thing to do. But it's so we also asked, let's say Angela turns up and presents all documents in the name of Angela and female, and I know that this isn't Angela because he's 6'4" and he's got a beard. And it's absolutely obvious. But I want to be inclusive in everything. And for this particular role, it wouldn't matter that, I've decided in my wokery that it won't matter that Angela is actually a bloke who thinks he's a woman. I'm not entitled to know whether Angela/Andrew has done the right thing and gone through the sensitive applications route. So I might decide I don't care, but I need to know that all of the checks against all of the names have been carried out. And the only way, because Angela didn't tick the box saying, yes, I've got other identities and these are what they are, the only way to know that that has happened is if this person has used the sensitive applications route, but I'm not entitled to know that because of these enhanced privacy rights that apply to this category of person. And this goes above and beyond anything that's actually in the Gender Recognition Act, where the privacy, the situations where privacy applies are, in my opinion, it's still too much. But it is quite tightly constrained. The scope is fixed and it's a relatively narrow scope. And there are exceptions within that where it doesn't apply. But be that as it may, this is one particularly dangerous example, in my view, where the reading of privacy has just expanded above and beyond anything that's actually in legislation.
And what about you've got the idea of digital identities? Do you think they'll be a solution?
I mean, we keep seeing digital identities are being touted by some of the gender critical groups and some individuals as being, oh, well, this is the solution to this. We had a look at digital identities, and they actually not only do they perpetuate the existing loopholes, they actually create additional risk. My sort of philosophical problem with trying to find a way to solve this problem through digital identities is that it's predicated on the premise that it is reasonable that people will want to withhold their sex and they will want to keep that private. And I don't think that that is reasonable. I don't think that we should be accepting that as a legitimate need for privacy and then trying to find ways to enable people to do that. I also think that some of the arguments around digital identities, that one of the beauties of them is that you can then selectively reveal different things about you depending on the context. And I think that this sometimes confuses a situation where information isn't necessary for that particular transaction and a situation where it is legitimate that somebody wants to keep information private. So, for example, purchasing alcohol in this country where the age to do that is the same across both sexes. So although revealing your sex isn't needed in order to prove your age to buy alcohol, I don't think that means that we should say that it is legitimate to keep that secret. On the other hand, revealing your address is not needed to buy alcohol. And I think it is legitimate that you wouldn't want to divulge that, particularly if you're a young woman in the off licence late at night and there's a bloke behind the counter. Why should he then have access to your address? I think you've got issues of safety there. So I think we need to be quite careful about that. But no, I mean, we looked at digital identities and we created one for me. And the problem with them is that the different attributes that are recorded, so your name, your age, your sex, date of birth, etc., they're all taken from existing documentation. So where you've already changed your passport or your driving license, or in that you don't have to show your birth certificate, but if you had a gender recognition certificate, you've already changed your birth certificate, where you've already changed those, and those are already, from my point of view, corrupted because they show gender, not sex, and a different name. That information simply gets uploaded into the digital realm. So you're simply replicating the existing problems that you've got at the so-called, if you like, old school paper level. You can use a digital identity for DBS check. You don't have to, but you can. So we looked at the guidance around that. And what's really frightening is that it creates distance between the applicant and the person who's representing the organisation with responsibility for safeguarding. So you can share your digital identity remotely. You don't have to have any face-to-face interaction. And verification of that digital identity isn't done by the organisation with responsibility for safeguarding, it goes to a third party who verifies it, reports back yes or no to the required level of certainty. So you've got a huge gap, and that kind of face-to-face interaction is also a key component of safeguarding. So let's go back to Angela. Angela pitches up, 6'4", beard, booming deep voice, and produces a passport which says Angela. I'm going to have alarm bells going off. It also takes quite a bit of, chutzpah to be able to go through with that. Is there reluctance? Is there hesitancy? Is there anxiety on the part of the applicant when they hand over their identity documents? All of those things, noting them, making a note, questioning, that's all key part of safeguarding. But where it's all remotely shared and you won't even have sight of the documents anyway, because it's all going to go through a third party, that opportunity for that face-to-face interaction, which is so key to safeguarding, is just removed. So we've got real concerns about digital identities as a way forward.
Wow, I mean, this is absolutely horrifying. It's terrible.
It's not great, is it? No.
And also, you found out so much that I hadn't heard about, and I guess quite a lot of people, the women here on the webinar, haven't heard about. So it's brilliant you found it out. But what are your proposed solutions, and what response have you had from government or other safeguarding organisations?
So the responses we had in the year preceding this report were, as I said, it was like, no, there's nothing to see, it's all fine. When I was at Tory conference, there was a lot more interest. Of course, everybody's changed now and it's all shuffled round again. So, we're starting to have those conversations again. But I think people are taking it a lot more seriously. But yeah, so our proposed solutions, interestingly, your national insurance number is the one piece of data that doesn't change. That's the one marker that doesn't change. Yes, you can update it. So Angela or Andrew can then have a note put against his national insurance number stating from 2022, I'm now Angela. But the fact that he was Andrew up until 2022 is never erased from that record. So one of our key recommendations is that anything that involves a change of identity, whether it's driving license, passport, whatever, and any DBS application has national insurance number as a mandatory part of that, because then you have to tie up all the identities. And national insurance numbers are given out all the time for all sorts of purposes. So this is not onerous or intrusive in our view. DBS certificates have to have all previous names listed, as they do for everybody. There is no special class of person who is exempt from this. And DBS certificates have to have sex registered at birth listed. That, again, should be non-negotiable. And if you don't want that, then don't apply for a job where safeguarding is concerned.
What can women do now? And I think you've got a crowdfunder that we could.
Well, we've got a crowdfunder which I'll link to, and I know times are really, really hard, but even a couple of quid, it really, really helps us out. We hopefully this should be in one of the major national papers next weekend. We keep pushing it off because too many exciting things keep happening in government, which sort of like crowds everything out. So if we can please get a little bit of peace and quiet, and then we've got an opportunity for that. So as soon as that hits in the press, then we're going to be pushing it out hard to ministers and MPs. So the best way to find out what's going on is to follow us on Twitter. We've already got a brilliant network of constituency contacts, but if more women would like to become a constituency contact, that would be absolutely amazing. And just drop me a DM in Twitter. So I think, just follow us on Twitter for the moment. And then once this hits in the press, then we're going to be pushing it out hard.